Thanks very much for staying with us. Time now for Eye on Africa with me, Georgia Calvin-Smith. Tonight, 7 out of 8 babies are delivered stillborn in a single night at a Zimbabwean hospital. Maternity staff say that things have become increasingly dire in the country as healthcare is impacted by an ongoing nurses' strike. Also, in an impassioned plea, the UN's refugee agency calls on African nations to do more than just talk and to protect migrants travelling within their borders. A new report warns that routes through the continent are some of the world's deadliest. And as Muslims around the world prepare to celebrate Eid-al-Adha, festivities in Morocco are muted in light of extra coronavirus precautions brought in by authorities. But first, in a damning window onto the state of Zimbabwe's healthcare system, 7 babies out of 8 delivered by caesarean were reportedly stillborn in one night at the country's biggest hospital. Medics say that it's the fallout from an ongoing nurses' strike that's impacted access to adequate medical care. Earlier this month, the Zimbabwe Society of Obstetricians and Gynecologists raised the alarm about the grave situation, saying that it was beyond dire and that unborn children and mothers are dying daily because of inadequate care. Well, Ryan Truscott tells us more about the circumstances leading up to the children's death.
The story emerged with a photo posted on social media by a local doctor, and it's a heartbreaking image. What you see is a white surface and 7 small bundles wrapped up in green hospital linen, each with a piece of paper resting on the top. What the doctor I spoke to said was that these were stillborn babies. The larger ones, and most are large, are the bodies of full-term babies. So in normal circumstances, these babies should have survived, but because their mothers didn't get the help they needed in time, they didn't live. And what the doctor said was that this picture, which he says was taken Monday at Harare Central Hospital, is not an isolated incident. Because of the impasse between the authorities and health staff over salaries and conditions, and because of the wider deterioration in the economic situation, it means that people have no money to seek private health care, and mothers are going home from hospital without babies.
So this is in part a fallout from an ongoing nurses' strike. Where do things stand currently with regards to that industrial dispute?
Well, it's a hugely complicated situation, and not only have you got the coronavirus and a shortage of PPE for frontline staff, but you've got inflation running at over 785%, and that's making doctors and nurses' salaries worthless. Nurses have been on strike for the past 6 weeks. Doctors had been reporting for work. That's thanks in part to a charity, the Higher Life Foundation, which stumped up 7 months ago to persuade doctors back to work, offering them allowances of 5,000 Zimbabwe dollars. But now, even at the official exchange rate, that money's worth just $65. And I was speaking to an official from one doctors group who was saying that the country's senior doctors are due to go on strike tomorrow. So the situation at hospitals does look set to deteriorate further. And what we're seeing in the last few days here is the rate at which COVID cases are being confirmed is really ramping up. Even the national broadcaster today had to broadcast outside from the balcony because of COVID within the team.
Well, Zimbabwe's agricultural minister, who was notorious for having once headed up an army unit that was behind the brutal Gukuruhundi massacre, has died. In the 1980s, Perant Shiri was the commander of the 5th Brigade, whose crackdown on a civilian revolt in the west of the country cost 20,000 lives. The retired general also helped oust former leader Robert Mugabe in a 2017 coup. Well, the tense wait for President Alassane Ouattara's next move continues. On Wednesday, the Ivorian leader's ruling party formally asked him to stand as their candidate for tense upcoming elections. He had said that he would not run for a third term, but that pledge has been revisited after the chosen RHDP candidate died unexpectedly. Well, Ouattara's supporters had hoped to get his response to the request that he run again at a huge press conference that was held on Wednesday, but he's kept everyone guessing and said that he'll be announcing his decision in a speech to the nation later. Sam Bradpiece was there. He tells us more.
Here at the Hôtel Ivoire, a very fancy hotel in the centre of Abidjan, delegates and high-ranking officials from the ruling RHDP party went on stage one after another and called on President Alassane Ouattara to stand for a third term in office. Ouattara himself, the president, stopped short of officially declaring his candidacy, but he did promise the people that he wouldn't let them down. Now, previously, Ouattara had promised the Ivorian public that he would not stand for a third term in office, instead opting to open the door, as he put it, to a new generation of Ivorian politicians. Now, that's not quite what we saw here tonight in terms of the kind of support that he's clearly got within the party.
Sam Bradpiece for us there, setting a sanitary example. Well, in other news, the UN's refugee agency has warned that migrant routes through Africa are some of the world's deadliest. A new report says that dozens of refugees and migrants die every month en route to Libya. And those who do make the journey are routinely abused, often by those in authority. The UNHCR has been clear about its appeal for nations to do more to protect vulnerable migrants and to respond to warnings that have been repeated often in the past.
We had abuse of people in bondage for months in warehouses, in really abusive condition on both routes, the East African route and the West African route. This is unacceptable. States today, with this report, with other reports from IOM, cannot say we didn't know. The perpetrators of physical violence, and in 47% of the case, the victims reported the perpetrators of violence are law enforcement authorities. Whereas in the past, we believed that it was mainly smugglers and traffickers. Yet, yes, they are key perpetrators of violence, but the primary perpetrators of violence are people who are supposed to protect. So when we say nothing can be done, well, no, something can be done. States have responsibility that they need to discharge in that respect. Why don't we seriously go after those people and try to combat impunity? Because as long as we don't do that, it is just talking. And talking will not do anything good for the people who are going to be abused on those routes. So we are a bit tired to write those reports after reports and hear the same complaint on the same victims. You can read some of the testimonies that are in the report. This is unacceptable, totally unacceptable.
Well, Muslims around the world are getting ready to celebrate Eid-al-Adha this Friday. But in Morocco, authorities have put a dampener on festivities because of a surge in coronavirus cases. People have been asked to limit their travel as much as possible. Wasim Kone has more.
The almost 2 billion Muslims around the world will experience a very peculiar Eid-al-Adha this Friday. Here in Morocco, the celebration of the annual Muslim holiday will be tempered by the threat of more coronavirus cases. For the past few days, hundreds of people have come here to the market in Schirat to buy a sheep ahead of Friday's holiday. Despite most people wearing masks, there's a sense of normalcy in the air. But the 10-week lockdown earlier this year has left its mark, and livestock farmers are worried about their finances.
المشكل الكبير هو انه قبل السنين اللي كان بعدا الكساب كيلقى بعدا الناس اللي غتسلفوا باش يشري كياخذ العلف كريدي. هذا العام هذا بسبب ديال كورونا يعني ما بقينش كريدي. ما كاينش كريدي، هذاك الشيء اللي عندك وليتي كتبيع من البهايم ديالك باقل ثمن باش تشري لهم العلف.
وحنايا دركا كون داز العيد مزيان غادي نشدوا فلوسنا، اللي دركا ما شادينش فلوسنا العيد ما دايش مزيان، قافيه عيانه، البهايم ما تمشاتش بكري. داكشي ما تمشاتش في ذاك الحجر الصحي ما تمشاوش بهايم.
According to recent statistics, 77% of Moroccan farmers saw their income decrease these past few months, compared to 70% of rural residents and 59% of people living in urban areas. Eid al-Adha is also a time of travel. Thousands of Moroccans usually visit their families that are scattered across the country. Earlier this week, the government declared a ban on all travel in and out of 8 large cities. That led to a major rush on the country's roads and at train and bus stations. But despite the new restrictions, authorities are deeply worried. On Monday, Morocco's health minister announced there had been as many new COVID-19 cases in 1 week as there had been in the previous 4 months.
And finally, former France 24 correspondent in Algeria, Monsef Ait Kessi, has been released after having been arrested in Algiers. He had been detained for several hours on Tuesday. It's still not clear exactly what charges he faced. There are reports that he had been held initially in connection to his work with foreign media. Well, that's it for Eye on Africa. Thanks for joining us. Do so again. Take care.
Liberté, égalité, actualité.